Thank you, Emily. And it's always a pleasure to be here with Ann Arbor District Library that co-partners with so many events here, not only in this library, but for the other 4 of libraries here. It is such a great pleasure to having this Reading Taiwan series out of 3. Today is the author's talk, the number 3, which is not the least, because we are so glad that Dr. Stamps is able to join us today, especially that he was in Taiwan for 7 years. That's amazing times. And he's going to give us a lot of history of what he was doing there and all the indigenous things that you and I probably cannot imagine. So it's always a great thing to having our own friends to be here to give us a great talk. But before we do that, I have a very important directors, Tai from Taipei Cultural Economic and Office in Chicago, and he is the OCAC director and coming from Chicago. So I want to welcome him here on the stage. I want to have Director Chai to give us a few words, but before we do that, just to let you know, Director Chai has been with us for last 3 years. He had done a tremendous support to not only for Michigan Taiwanese American Organization's events, but also the entire Michigan communities that having a Taiwanese American event to collaborate with the mainstreams. For example, like a Detroit Institute of Arts, Detroit Riverfront Conservancy's work, and as well as the Double 10 celebrations, as well as last night we were at the Veterans annual meeting that he was there as well. So it's a great support. We are having him here with us in Michigan here. One of the things that we truly impressed with him is not only he is such a great uprising start in the future at the OCAC, but also because of he's just doing such a great job that he's going to be returning to Taiwan after 3 years of work here. And we are sad that he's departing from us. But in the meantime, we are happy for him because there's a better job, waiting, better positions waiting for him. So with that, I would like to welcome Director Chai to come up on the stage. We have a little gift on behalf of Michigan Taiwanese American Organizations, as well as the community at large. That little gift for him. Of course, you can see this is from Michigan Taiwanese American Organization bag. The Taiwan spotlights, so it's important. We'll have an entire group photo later on. And please give us a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you for your wonderful introduction. And actually, I enjoy come to every time I come to Michigan, especially attend the event held by Michigan Taiwanese American Organization. Thank you for promoting Taiwanese culture to our American friends and to connect our local society and our community. Today, again, hello everyone. My name is Chin Tsai. I'm the director of Cultural Center of Taiwan, Chicago, and it's an honor for me to be here. First, I would like to thank the Michigan Taiwanese American Organization for inviting Professor Richard Stamps, an archaeologist from Oakland University, to speak today about the myth of Taiwan's indigenous people. And I also want to mention that Professor Stamps displayed his valuable research and architects of the Dao people that's the tribe from Orchid Island at the Cranbrook Institute of Science this past April. This amazing exhibit called Orchid Island Exploration helped introduce Taiwan's culture to many American friends. I hope everyone today learns more about Taiwan and has the opportunity to visit someday. Thank you.
Now the most important parts. Dr. Stamps, if you would like to come on the stage. And we got a word that Dr. Stamps want to introduce himself for about 45 to 1 hour minute. So let's let him do the show.
Thank you.
You gonna be okay?
Yep, I'm all set. Well, I am excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation. As you will see from my comments, I was blessed to have the opportunity to visit Taiwan multiple occasions, different capacities, and I ended up writing a little bit of something here. It says, "Thank you, Taiwan and its peoples. In my life, I was blessed to have a growing up, coming of age experience at age 19, and it happened on Taiwan. I had a love for Taiwan, still have a love for Taiwan, the physical space, okay? The snow-capped Yushan, the beautiful beaches of Kunding, the sculptured stone formations at Yeliu, the Tarako Gorge, the Zhoushui and Dadu River drainages on the west coast, the Puli Basin just north of Sun Moon Lake, the carefully tended rice paddies, the sugarcane fields, the sunsets, etc., etc., etc. It is a beautiful place. Add to the natural beauty the interesting complexity of the people. When I arrived in 1962, Han peoples referred to the indigenous people as Shandiren. Shan means mountain, Di means place, and Ren is people. The people who lived in the mountains. Those were the indigenous people. The complexity of the Han group. So you got the indigenous groups. And I'm going to tell you, I'll give you the number like 13 different groups. The complexity then of the indigenous is added to by the Han groups. And you say, well, all Han Chinese, they all look alike, right? You know the Han Chinese, they look like Chinese. But the early Qing dynasty that came to Taiwan 300-400 years ago, the stories of Zheng Chenggong, this pioneer, this so proud to be Chinese, but at the time there were others coming into Taiwan, and actually Zheng Chenggong, he was the one who kicked the Dutch out of Tainan because they had started a Dutch settlement in Taiwan. He kicked the British out of Beito in the north. So he was quite a hero. And then we have the Portuguese name on early maps. The Portuguese, they floated by in their ships pretty much on their way to Japan. But they looked over and they said, my gosh, what a beautiful island. And in Portuguese, beautiful island is Formosa. So if you look at some older maps, it's going to say, well, here's Japan, here's Korea, here's China, here's Formosa. Well, that's because the Portuguese gave it this name. Then, later on, this place gets the name the Terraced Island, or Taiwan. The waves of people who arrived from different places, bringing different cultures at different times. The Minnan speakers from South China, the Kejia people, or otherwise known as the guest people, the Kejiaran. Then the Japanese occupation from 1895 to 1945. Then the wave of the Waishangren, foreign-born folks, who came from the China mainland, escaping the civil war on mainland China. The split tensions between the Taiwanese and the Waishangren, oh, the complexity, the dynamics, the power struggles, political and economical. Add to this the religious diversity of Taiwan, with Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, expect that, but it's all on top of a layer of folk religion. Then add to this religious complexity, then you add the Tianzhu Jiao, the Jidu Jiao, even Muslims and Mormons. I ended up being there as one of the young Mormon missionaries. Such complexity, all on a small island. It's only 90 miles north to south. 90 miles east to west, 250 miles north to south. Now, those of us being in Michigan, and you probably haven't seen this, but we have this thing called the map, the Michigan, well, the thumb. You could put Taiwan from the tip of the thumb to Toledo, and from Detroit to Lansing. You could put all of Taiwan in the thumb of Michigan. Well, so much complexity in this relatively small place. And as you may or may not know, the majority of Taiwan is mountainous. It's so mountainous. I remember one guy, he said, I wanted to go farming with my friends up in the mountains. So we went up in the mountains. He came back down. I said, well, how'd it go? He says, I couldn't do any farming. I was so busy, so hanging on. The hills were so steep, he couldn't do much farming because it's very steep. Majority of the people are crowded down the west side and then a bit down the east side. Well, the complexity in this beautiful place. That was what I encountered as a 19-year-old in 1962. I fell in love with the people, the language, the history. I was an American. And in 1962, we had not even celebrated our 200th birthday, our bicentennial. And here they had 4,000 years of history. So the young kid from here comes and encounters this depth of history and culture and language, and so amazing. There's a little phrase I learned in Taiwan, and it says, as a twig, that's part of a little tree, as a twig is bent, so the tree is inclined. My twig was bent on Taiwan, 1962 to 65. Taiwan changed the trajectory of my life. My life has been enriched, improved, expanded, beautified, improved by Taiwan. Thank you, Taiwan. Now, back to something I just mentioned about all the diversity, the different groups, the different places where they came from. As an anthropologist, I've also learned that the importance of variability in a gene pool, plant or animal. it's so important to have a variety in your population. You guys are probably too young to remember, but do you know what an elm tree looks like, a Dutch elm tree? These were a very popular tree in the 50s, 60s, and some guy who was selling elm trees, he went across America and he just sold all these trees. So every little town bought a bunch of trees and put tree-lined streets with the elm trees. Yeah. And they were very good. They had shade. They're just great trees. But there's another thing called the Dutch elm disease. And when the Dutch elm disease came through, it's estimated that by 1973, 40 million trees were killed. So if the only tree you've got in town is an elm tree, you've lost all your shade and all of your beautiful whatever. More recently, do you know what an ash tree looks like? Its leaf is a little bit smaller, but they're green and they're pretty and they make firewood and you do whatever with your ash tree. What came along? The emerald ash borer killed about 40 million trees in 2002. So here's the point that I'm trying to make. If you want to have a beautiful city and you want to have a bunch of trees, don't plant just one kind of tree. And if you want to have a successful business, group, country, community, diversity is to your advantage. So you might wipe out all the elms, and then you might wipe out all the ash trees, but you've still got all of those others. So, again, the importance of variation in a population. It enhances the survival and success rate of the group. So if you want to survive and succeed, surround yourself with variation, age, gender, skills, ideas, etc. So the idea of variation is extremely important for the success, the ongoing success. So just a couple of those off the top of the head ideas. Okay, now back to the program. It says, go to slide 2. Okay, the indigenous groups in Taiwan. And what I want to do is I want to put the value of the indigenous groups in Taiwan as just enhance that, the fact that Taiwan has the indigenous groups. And just as in America we have Native American groups, around the world you have so many different original people or Yuanjuming. So we look at Taiwan. I'm going to try the technology here. We'll see if I go forward. Yeah, there we go. So Taiwan, you see all of the different groups here. It's estimated that, not estimated, it's registered that there are 16 recognized by the government indigenous groups on Taiwan. Now, when the Han Chinese got there, and they came from mainland China, and they landed, and they said, oh, this is a good farmland, they kind of pushed the people up into the hills. Thus you get the term the Shandiran, the people who live in the hills. Although there were some Pingpudzus that still just adjusted in with the Han. But in the midst of all of this complexity of the indigenous groups in Taiwan, in 1949, the KMT imposed martial law. And this was kind of understandable. A lot was going on. There were wars going on, pressure. And so the attempt to control it, they imposed martial law. It was harsh, more harsh on some than others. And I would say probably on the indigenous peoples, it was the harshest. But by the 1980s, the indigenous groups pushed for some more traditional justice, some identity, some revitalization of their cultures. And this has moved forward so much so that we end up here, we're talking about indigenous people in Taiwan. 50 years ago, you would not have been talking about this. Later, I'm going to just mention Orchid Island and Lanyu, and I had the opportunity to go to study the history of the indigenous people on Lanyu, or Orchid Island. It's a little island halfway between Taiwan and the Philippines, but it's so beautiful they call it Orchid Island. You know, like orchids grow wild on the island. Yeah. Anyway, I was, as an archaeologist, I was trying to understand the history, and I found a place. That had some things like this little stone tool. Now, this one's probably not really that old. It's probably only, 1,000 years old or whatever. But we found a previous occupation, and it was called Lobas Basan. And I found some stone tools, also found some pottery, and also found some unique and kind of complicated and a little bit controversial. There was a portion of a graveyard. Okay, but anyway, I was trying to just document what was there. And so I was out digging away, and I was staying, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting too excited here. But anyway, I was working, and I was staying at the Presbyterian, they had a little hostel there where travelers could come and rent a room. And so I was staying there. I was there for 3 months, and so the people who took care of the hostel, youth hostel, they were very gracious, and they would feed me like 2 meals a day. And they had a son who was in junior high school. Well, the junior high school kid, now this is 1977, the junior high school kid had finished school, and he was walking home, and he saw me over there digging holes in the plants. He came over and he looked, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm studying your history." And he said, "Oh, my school teacher tells me my history is not important. It's only important for me to learn Chinese history. You know, the Shang and the Zhou and the Qin and the Han and Sui Tang, all of those, to learn Chinese history, not indigenous history." But that has changed. There has been kind of a resurgence and the ability, and I admire Taiwan for this, to be inclusive. And you can have your Buddhism, and you can have your Taoism and your folk religion, but you can also have the local, and they can fit together. So anyway, when this kid made that statement, I mean, this is a long time ago. That was 1977. This is 2025, and I still remember him saying, "Oh, my teacher said, my history is not important. It's only real Chinese history." Now, that's just part about China. China is, Zhongguo, the center of the universe, and everything revolves around China, okay? And they were a superpower, three different times, Han Dynasty, Tang Dynasty, Qing Dynasty. They were so big, so powerful, the perception of being the center of the universe was still there. I think it is improving in Taiwan to be a little more receptive to other things. So now flashing back. So 1962, I get to Taiwan, and I was serving in Kaohsiung, lovely city, and we had a group of about 10 or 12 of us, and he said, let's just take a little tour up in the mountains. And so we went to Sandiman. This picture was taken, and you can still read it on the sign there. And I said, well, why do we want to go up there? And he said, there's some interesting people up there. And I had seen, I had seen some of the folks from Sandiman, and we went up to Sandiman, we put on the costumes, and I don't know, I wouldn't expect you to recognize, you wouldn't know Fowler, but you might recognize this guy over here. That was, yeah, that was me so many years ago. But you could rent the costumes and take pictures, and it was very interesting. This was my first real introduction to the indigenous people. But then I later learned that folks would come down out of Sandiman and the other villages, and they would bring their trinkets and their treasures, and they would sell them on the side of the street. So as I was preparing for this and I was going through, I found this little old black and white photo. And I look on the back and it says, Kaohsiung, November 1962. The Indians came out of the hills and sell their goods on the street. You know, that was kind of the perception I put it into. You know, they were like the Indians. But at that time, there was still a bit of a, I don't want to say a prejudice against them, but there was, it was not the best thing to put on your resume, I think, you know. So anyway, Sandiman, the street vendors. Then, in addition to having my first experience there, then I went to Orchid Island. This is the one, Lanyu. Beautiful little place. And again, I was an archaeologist. I was trying to understand the history and where did these people come from and how did they get here? So I stayed in the youth hostel, but I needed some help. So I hired the guy right here, and this is his wife, and this is his father-in-law. Oh, and that's me, by the way, if you didn't recognize him. So anyway, I had the good fortune to go and live there. Now, I had the disadvantage. I spoke Mandarin. I was a foreigner speaking Mandarin. So my Mandarin was kind of like a foreigner speaking Mandarin. But I had enough experience by that time. I could pretty much get in trouble and get out of trouble. And so, but these guys didn't speak Mandarin. That wasn't their language. And so it became an interesting little game we would play, where we would make mistakes in our pronunciation and our grammar, and we would giggle at each other. And they knew mine wasn't perfect. I knew theirs wasn't perfect, but we had that little communication, a special communication as the third person in the activity there. So, so I ended up on Lanyu. Now, I did have another occasion. The first time I was a missionary. The second time I went back as a doctoral dissertation student. I was in Puli, studying again the history and where the people came from, and then I went back as a scholar to do this work on Orchid Island. And so it was interesting because I was perceived of in different ways. You know, as a student, you're just a student. But when you go back with a degree, they say, oh, they bow down and stuff. And actually, in Taiwan in 1962, all of the groups seemed to have a sense of respect for missionaries because they were there trying to help people. And missionaries in mainland China, they were famous for two things: hospitals and schools. And so if you've got a group of foreigners that are coming over to make people well and to educate them, that's good stuff. So I had the opportunity. I was always a foreigner. Come on, you're a foreigner, look like a foreigner, you're a foreigner. But there was a certain amount of respect. Well, I tried to figure out, well, how do you understand foreign cultures? How do you understand these indigenous people? And there's a model of culture that I worked up over the years as a professor. And I said, humans have a physical body, okay? And we look different, but we're 99% genetically all the same anyway. So you got this little human body in all these different cultures around the world. But every ethnic group, every culture, they have to come up with some mechanisms to survive. And they have to come up with some things like economic systems. Economic systems. Are you a farmer? Are you a fisherman? Are you an industrialist? What do you do for a living? So this idea of economic systems. And then along with the economic systems, you also have the technology that goes with it. And so I put economics and technology, I put those in that same loop. But we also know that all ethnic groups have to be organized, and one of the first organizations, it's the kinship organization. It's the family that you're born into. You know, if you're Chinese, who do you inherit your surname from? It's your dad, right? So it's a patriarchal system. But if you're an Iroquois living on the border between Canada and the US and New York, if you're Iroquois, they are a matriarchal system. So you inherit your name, your property through that matriarchy system. So there are different kinds of kinship systems. We're not here to judge right or wrong. We're here to just, it's not right or wrong, it's just different, okay? So when you're trying to understand some people, this idea of what is their kinship system. And typically, I should go back quick. Typically, if you have an argument between two people in the family, who resolves the family? If it's a patriarchy, the dad. If it's a matriarchy, it's the mom. So those kinds of disputes are resolved in the family. Okay. But what happens if your next door neighbor comes over and keeps, picking the peaches off your tree, and you have to find a way to resolve it. So tribal governments come into existence, okay? And the tribal governments, they're important because they help resolve these issues. Now, ultimately, tribal governments develop into things like governments. Okay, so every surviving ethnic group on the face of the earth has to have some kind of government, okay? Also, we found as anthropologists that everybody, it's probably a lot of it's a learned behavior, but every surviving ethnic group has to answer some of those questions. Who am I? Where did I come from? What is the purpose of life? Where do I go after I die? And those answers to those questions become the spiritual beliefs, the religions. Okay? Well, one of the reasons I put up this hokey little drawing here is because if you want to understand a group of people, academics, they're really kind of goofed up a little bit because you go to the economics department or the history department or the sociology department. And it's as if you can go and understand a group of people by just understanding their economics. You can't. It is an interdisciplinary approach. If you want to understand the folks in Italy, you got to know something about Catholicism. You want to understand the folks in India, you've got to know some things about Hinduism. And so when you put this all together, it's an interdisciplinary, it's an interconnected. If you want to understand something about American politics, but that's just politics. Any kinship involved? How many Kennedys have we had? How many Bushes have we had? And I remember a woman in Taiwan saying to me with tears in her eyes, she said, she was so excited, this was probably about 72, 73. I'm so excited because the democracy that's coming to Taiwan. And then there was an election. So Chiang Kai-shek dies, and who becomes the president? First the vice president for a little bit, and then it's Jiang Jingguo. And she said to me, is this really a democracy where the son of the previous president becomes the president? It starts to become like a, like a kingship or something. So anyway, so my point is, if you want to understand this group, any group, just ask these 4 questions. But then you also have to realize the impact of the environment. The impact of the environment. So I circle it with this little green squiggly thing. That's the environment. And the environment is pressing in, and the economics and the technology, those are typically responses to the environment. And so you have to look at that interaction between the economics and the environment. But it also affects other things, the environment. How many million people cities do you have in northern Alaska? You don't, because the environment will not sustain it. Now, if they start drilling oil up there, somebody may do something, but that's not sustainable. So anyway, the impact, even this, the impact between the environment and the economics. If you go to Mexico and you go out in the Yucatan Peninsula and you get to the Mayan culture, and you find out that they grow corn, beans, and squash. Guess what the most important god is? Well, there are 2 really important ones. If you're a corn farmer, what do you need? God, corn god, and the rain god, right? And so there is that interaction. Okay, keep moving along here, Stamps. You're having too much fun. But then if you take that model of culture and turn it, 90 degrees, and then you say, that's the present with all of those things. But then you have it comes out of the past. And so if we really want to understand a group of people, you need to understand their past, their history, where they came from and how they got there, and what were the interactions that went on between the environment and the people. So when I first had this opportunity to talk about the indigenous people, again, I flash back to the Tao people. They live on Orchid Island. They live on an island. Well, don't be too surprised that they fish. Okay, well, what's the technology if you're a fisherman? Boats are handy, and hooks, lines, and sinkers, and if we had more time, I'd tell other stories. But this boat, it's the red with the white and the black. This was a brand new boat. It was handcrafted from the logs out of the forest in the center of the island. And it was time for the boat christening ceremony. And so they have a big festival. They invite all their neighbors and friends from other villages, and they get all of this is taro root mainly, and there's, this is actually millet. This would be taro. This is taro across the bottom here. So they have a big ceremony, and then they pick this thing up and they carry it singing, and that's a ceremony that just Google Orchid Island boat launching ceremony, because they get, this boat probably weighs a couple 1,000 pounds. How do you get it from the guy's house down to the water? You get all these people, and it takes like 20 or 30, and they pick it up. But before they pick it up, they have to get revved up, and it's like before the football game. Humba, 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 and they get all adrenaline up, and then they pick this thing up and they go marching down to launch it into the water. So this is an example of an ethnic group with a particular economic system and the technology that goes with it. I had the good fortune to, when I was doing my dissertation, to work with some Bunun people in west central Taiwan. And they were basically farmers. They were farmers. Well, if you're a farmer, what do you need? You know, you get all of your terraces and your ditches and your digging sticks and your hoes and your baskets. So you have the technology that goes with that economic system. There's another group, the Atayal group. They're basically hunters and gatherers. So for them to go hunting and gathering, they need spears and bows and arrows and knives and the like. And we'll talk a little bit. The story I'm going to tell you is from an Atayal group. So each of them have their kinship system, they have their tribal governments, they have their spiritual belief systems. But it's important that the impact of language, we learn a language. We're not born with languages. So we learn a language. And as we learn the language structure. And we use the language as a vehicle to store, organize, retrieve. We think in a language. I encourage you, think a thought outside of language. And I know that there are some mechanisms in the art world. A painter can paint a painting and express something without language. But the majority of what we do is in our language. So language, each language is unique. We think in a language, but also the importance of group solidarity. I had an occasion one time to be in mainland China with a study tour group, and I heard these folks over talking, and it was not Chinese. And then I looked closer, and they had on some T-shirts, and the T-shirts had one of those Orchid Island boats on it. And I knew, I mean, come on, there are only 5 villages, and China's a big place, and to find these groups. But the language tied them together, and they're out there having a tour. But the language ties us together. So we're here today, in part, because of the desire to maintain some Chinese language. So we have teachers who teach Chinese language. We have a student here who's learning Chinese, because it's really important. So that sense of uniting the group, it's there. So, okay, I'm going to try and tell you a story. And I'm going to try and tell a story from this wonderful book, right? And it's so colorful. And who was it that got this book for me? She got this book for me, so I was able to use it. And I want to kind of go through a story here. And the story we want to look at is the story about an Atayal group. They live up in the mountains. And in their mythology, their history, their tradition, they look at the stars every night, but they also look at the sun and the moon. Well, in their tradition, they had 2 suns, big round suns. And so what happens was there was the gold sun and the silver sun. The silver sun's power started growing stronger as it went through time. And as this sun was getting brighter and brighter, it started to heat things up. The rivers were drying up, the plants were dying, the people, they had no concept of what it's like to be cool because it was always so hot. So one of the things I really liked about these folks, they're in this tough situation, and then they said, again, the crops are withering up, rivers drying up, coolness disappears. So the Atayal people, they said, we need to do something. We cannot stand it anymore. Something had to be done. And to me, that was one of the key things I got out of reading the story. Here's a group of people. They've got a problem. And then instead of just saying, well, we got a problem, somebody come and help me, or what's going to happen? No, they had a problem. They said, we got to solve the problem. So the solution they came up to the problem is we got to go get rid of one of those suns. It's too bright. And so they got 3 warriors who volunteered. And the 3 warriors that volunteered, you see 3 of them here, they said, doing what needs to be done. And you do it because it needs to be done, not because you're just going to get paid for it. If all we do is what we get paid for, then we're kind of missing life. So that idea of volunteering. And so they created a plan. They said, we're going to go and we're going to shoot down that bright sun that's too bright. Well, they said, okay, we know this is probably going to take us a long time because they had to march to the other side of the earth. Didn't know where it was. There was no I-75 to get there. So they had to march. Silver sun went down. Da, da, da. So they get these 3 volunteers. But what's he got on his back? He's got a basket with a baby in it. Because he says, these 3 volunteers, warriors, they said, we know we will probably not be able to complete it ourselves. So they put their babies in the basket as they go marching, looking for the end of the world where they can get close enough to shoot down the sun. Well, so as they're going along, though, they also were planting seeds. Even though it was dry, they were planting seeds, and they were teaching their children how to hunt and how to gather and how to survive. So you see the 3 warriors with their little kids. The message there has something to do with intergenerational activities and learning. But they brought their tools, their arrows, their spears, their seeds, and the plants, and then they took the one had the bow and arrow, another one had a drum. So years passed, and all these years, and it was getting worse and worse. And then the old guys, they say, we can't go any further, but we've trained up our sons. Sons, you go on and complete the mission that we started. And again, the parents said, the warriors had taught their sons how to stay alive. Well, they finally get to the end of the world. And from the end of the world, they're close enough to the sun. And so I love this part. I just want to read it out of the book. It's so cool in the book. And he says, the silver sun was not too far away above the cliff. Heat on the cliff was irritating. The young warrior Tianmu pulled his bow up. Biho held his spear up high. Yogan beat his drum hard. So these were the 3 warriors, and the one is shooting his arrow, the other is throwing a spear, and the other is beating the drum. And the good news is they were successful. And the spear and the arrows and the drum noise cracked the moon, the sun, that was too big. And so it falls into pieces, and now it's not so bright that it's killing everything. Okay? What happens then? Things start to cool down a little bit. And I like this one too. They talk about, he says, oh, we get to that page, love it. He says, the three young warriors walked over the green mountains, through leafy woods, down the cool rivers, across the plains. They strode towards their hometown where their families had been waiting day and night. And they're also excited. Well, the young warriors again. The young warriors posed in a gesture of victory. Hey, flying squirrels jumped among the trees. Hogs growled in the deep ends of the woods. The young warriors marched forward. They were going home where their families were waiting. Back in the village, the young warriors told their families everything about the journey. This is the mythology. These are the stories that are told to keep things going. The elderly prayed for the dead and blessed the young. No one would forget this great journey forever. So we have here an example that I think brings several things into focus. No one would forget them. And I wanted to leave, what's that next slide up? Yeah, I like this. The three guys coming back, one with his bow, one with his spear, the other one with their drum. This is a nice story. But what can we learn from this story? What can we take away from the story? And to me, in part, it's not just what can we take away from this story, what can we take away from indigenous literature in Taiwan? What can we use in our own lives? And I think there are a couple of things. We've already mentioned the importance of language and the value of maintaining some language. It's so hard, though. You know, if you go from one country and you end up in another country, it's so difficult to maintain both. But keep trying. Don't give up. Okay? The importance of language. Also the importance of being in balance with nature. And also the holistic approach. That was the economics and the kinship and the government and the religion. That's a holistic approach. We need to look at the whole thing. I think a couple more takeaways. The importance of variation in a population and the importance of the intergenerational. That is, kids learning from their parents and from their grandparents. Do whatever you can to maintain those opportunities. I want to kind of close with a poem and then say thank you. And it says, title, The View of the Ocean from Orchid Island. Such beauty, such splendor, such power, such force, the churning white foam, the exploding white spray, surges over the black and gray cliffs and rocks. The winds gust and the plants submit, bending to the ground, clinging to the patches of soil, the blue of the sky, the azure of the reef, the milk white of the foam, The sea is great at putting we humans in perspective. We are so small, like a grain of sand on the beach. But our potential is important in influencing the ocean, the Earth's future, and the humans who call it home. Let's make some good decisions. Well, I think I'm going to say thank you for being such a nice audience. My gosh, I'm up here waving my arms and banging into the microphone, but I think there really are some things to learn about the value of diversity. And as we look at the world today, the world is really in a tough place because there are so many people who are trying to escape bad situation, but where do you go? And we have so many people in this country, but all countries, and how do we maintain the diversity? How do we show respect and kindness to everybody? I encourage your group, and I'm so proud to be invited. You're maintaining that sense of who you are, and I encourage you to keep doing that. So I'm gonna kind of bow a little bit. You're gonna clap, and then I'm not sure what our timing is. Are we? And okay, then so after I bow, you clap. Then we have a microphone if you have some questions that you'd like to ask Ophir, and do that. So I'm going to bow. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stamps. So if you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll come over with the microphone. We do have some people who are watching the live stream, so we want to make sure that they can hear the question being asked. So it's asked into the microphone. So just let me know if you have any questions.
Yes, sir.
Professor, that was fantastic, very educational. I'm curious, what was the language that was spoken by the indigenous people? Did they have a script?
Every group on that map have their own language. They have their own language with their own stories and their own history and their own how do we adapt to the environment. And so they come up with words. It's like, how many words do the Eskimo have for snow? I mean, we got snow, and they've got wet snow, cold snow, powdery snow, blowy snow. So each culture had its own language. Which, wow, the complexity and the problem. So many people are losing their languages. And it's a challenge. How do you maintain those? So yeah, language, very interesting question.
Follow on to it,
Yeah.
real quick. Any of those languages survive in modern day Taiwan in any shape or form?
They do survive. Each one of those groups, they have festivals. They'll have their Thanksgivings. The one in Orchid Island, they have a thing called the Flying Fish Festival. Because as the flying fish migrate along, it's a big harvest time. So when there's that big harvest and they harvest it all, and then they have a Flying Fish Festival. And they sing those songs and they tell those stories. I have to tell you, my assistant that I got, I said, I'm going back to America, but I'll be back. Do you need anything? And he said, yes. He said, I need batteries for my tape recorder. I don't know how he got the money to get the tape recorder in the first place, but he got a tape recorder. And I think it had a radio tape recorder. And I said, well, yeah, just plug it in and listen to the radio. And he said, no. I want to record the songs at the Flying Fish ceremony. I want to record the songs of the christening of a new house. I want to record the songs at the launching of the new boat. Because that's me, that's us. So please bring me batteries. Then he said the second thing, he said, because when I go fishing, sometimes I go out in the boat, but sometimes I just go down and then kind of scuba dive with no, you just swim around. And he said, I've made a dart gun. I've made a dart gun from some wood and slots, and then he's got a little spear thing out there. But he said the rubber bands I salvaged from some old car tires, car inner tubes. He said, but I've heard that in America, you used to have red inner tubes, and those red inner tubes have more stretch and were stronger and more powerful. So please bring me some red inner tube stuff, because, you know, that was what was important to him. So I took him some. I didn't find the red inner tubes. I went to Dick's Sporting Goods, and I found they have some spear guns with a bigger, stronger, and so I got him some of those. So I gave him batteries and stronger things for his little dart gun, and aspirins for his wife, because she would spend 8 hours a day out working in the taro fields, bent over like this, you know, and I just knew, aspirins and vitamins. But anyway, yes, interesting question. Any other questions?
You as an anthropologist, and also I think that you also study the Native Americans in Utah, right?
Oh, in California.
In California,
Utah,
sorry.
New Mexico, and Michigan, and yeah.
So what have you seen the major similarities or differences that between the Taiwan intelligent people and the Native Americans? That from the way I'm not anything about this field, but I heard that the people here are the cousins of us in Asia.
Yeah. That relates to the question of where did the Native Americans come from? And the most well-documented, well-known answer to that question right now is that as human beings developed and the population grew, they started to spread and go to new places. And that during the time of the ice ages, if you get a bunch of ice piling up on the ground, where does that ice come from? It evaporates out of the ocean. So when the ice ages go up, the ocean levels go down. And so during the ice ages, places like connecting together Siberia and Alaska, it opened up a land bridge. Now, the bridge was so wide they didn't know they were on it. And the humans were just following the herds, the animals, the reindeer, the mammoths, the mastodons, the different animals. Those animals were looking for new food and new places, so they were coming. So the best explanation at this point in time is that the peoples in the New World, the majority of them came from Asia, so that's where they would be the cousins. But the interesting thing is they came from different places at different times, bringing different cultures, all of those economic, kinship, government, and then they get here and they're adapting to a new environment. And so if you're coming out of, Mongolia on the steppe, you got one environment. That might work if you got down to the southwest, but if you get to Florida, you're going to have to adapt to that different environment. So I think the majority of the Native Americans, indigenous people in America, came across the Bering Land Bridge. Now, I'm not against saying that the Vikings were pretty good sailors. And I've seen some stuff recently that, yeah, the Vikings, they got over to Canada. And the Phoenicians lived in the Mediterranean. These were seafaring, trading people. And so they were going to one place and taking it to another place and making money. The one that's very fascinating right now, I've been doing a little research, is how do you make bronze? What is bronze? Because we have the Stone Age and the Bronze Age, right? How do you make bronze? It's a combination of two things, right? What's the majority of bronze? Copper. But copper is a little bit malleable, and there's some, it's good for doing some things, but it's not good for making like an axe head. So what is it that you add to the bronze to toughen it up? Tin. Well, where do you get tin? And a lot of the bronze building that was going on in the Mediterranean, they were finding the copper someplace, that's still up in the air, but the tin was coming out of England. And there were some tin mines in England, and so there were some boat people, like the Phoenicians, floating up there, and they would get the tin and then bring it down and put it into that smelting process to make bronze. So there were some boat floating people. And if you go down to Mexico on the East Coast, down in the Gulf, and you see the Olmec culture, and they're most famous for these big round stone heads. And if you look at them, they're African. They really look African. Do I know of a connection there? No, but so, yeah. How did your cousins get over here? I think mainly they came across the Bering Land Bridge when the glaciers lowered the ocean. The question is, what was Taiwan's connection to the mainland during the ice ages? Oh, yeah. A lot of things were kind of hooked together. Yeah, interesting question. Any other questions?
I have a question if nobody.
There you go.
Okay, well, this is a great talk, and I want to get two comments. One is, the first is you think in language rather than you think. Second part is diversity. I think today I'm from mainland China. I heard you saying is the young people was taught that you got to learn Chinese history rather than the Taiwanese. That is just really something. Through language, we can misinterpret quite a lot, because language, what I heard from your stories and you tell your experience, all of this is the language. I learned English a long time ago, but now I have to speak English. And the JP tried to learn Taiwanese, Chinese. So group you also have a bear through this language barriers. I do think what you talk about, we think in language, is probably the most important thing for our humans. And a lot of people do not know how to fairy tale the stories, how important it is. This is the basic of the language. And sometimes the basic language is so simple, but it's so critical we forgot about that. Because right now, just look like this LLM, large language model. They use electricity, half of the city electricity runs to 1 second. And then put in AI, you get this. We lose the basic thing, but we got a huge thing, and we create a lot of trouble killing each other, and all of this. I think this lecture, what I learned from you is that we have to get back to the original we think we understood, but we don't. We do not know this.
Well, and I think it's important not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Okay? and you can save the one as you learn the other. So the advantage of being multilingual, so important. Yeah, so yes, multilingual and learning it and maintaining it. But the more we get together, you mentioned translation. I remember trying to learn Chinese and somebody came up with mama hoo hoo.
Oh, yes. You know Mama Hoo Hoo?
Yeah, it means horse, horse, tiger, tiger. Well, what on earth does horse, horse, tiger, tiger have to do with so, you know? Or the fun one is mama, chi ma, ma, budong, mama, ma, ma, right? Where you take the same sound of ma, put the different intonation, so you got your ma, 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 chi ma, ma, budong, ma, 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 ma. And it makes it difficult for we foreigners if we don't have a tonal language, you know, to do that. But yeah, language is important. Translation is a difficult thing because, you know, what's going to happen when you get AI translating mama hoo hoo? You're going to be reading along and it's going to say horse, horse, tiger, tiger, and you're not going to know the deeper meaning that's really there. Yeah. I'm not sure I've answered your question, but I like the question.
But
Yeah.
I just appreciate that you speak the thing language. Sometimes I dream using the language. One of the stories when I wake up, I say, what is going on? I had a dream the other day, my mom, and my mom passed away many years ago, and came to the United States, and they asked a decent question in English. I then asked Mom, how did you learn English? That's a dream, but language.
Well, and speaking of dreams, I remember when I was trying to study Chinese, and I was trying so hard to memorize, work things, and it's probably after I'd been there about 9 months, 6 to 9 months, and I woke up one morning and I said, I was dreaming in Chinese.
That's right.
So there was a feeling of breakthrough. Yeah. I think we have another question.
Yeah. Dr. Stamps, thank you so much for your stories. Last time we were here, several weeks ago, for this presentation, you mentioned that you were really impressed by the Taiwan literature exhibit on the second floor. And then you said that you're going to encourage people to go to the second floor. Would you say something about what you saw?
Yeah, I would say if you haven't seen the exhibit on the second floor, the library did a wonderful job of creating a space, and the creators of the exhibit put together these panels, graphically well done, but the panels are so well written. They're honest, and they kind of tell the truth, and they talk about things that aren't easy to talk about, you know, like martial law and that kind of stuff. So the panels are well written, artistically done, and I especially like the one about the food. There's a table with Chinese food on it and all of these foods. So I definitely encourage you on your way down to check out the exhibit on the second floor. And I recommend to you too that maybe you borrow their exhibit and get your organization out of Chicago to say, hey, there's this great resource. Maybe we can take this show on the road. Yeah, so everybody go visit the exhibit. Yeah. We got one more in the back, and then, yeah.
A question. I'm really curious about the sun, the shooting at the sun. And there are quite a few tribes that actually have variations of the story, and also you hear about that, you know, in the Chinese histories, in probably native Indians as well. Any insights about like whether probably back then, in the old ages, they were actually really just like we have the Ice Age, right? So were there a period of time that actually was really scorching hot, and that's why in various areas around the world actually come up with the same story or different variations of the same story.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes back to that concept of imbalance with nature, you know, and that there are certain things that you can't ignore, you know, and the sun is just pivotal to our lives. And so every culture is exposed to the sun. And so every culture then has to try and interpret, you know, what is that thing and how does it survive? And it comes and it goes and it changes, you know, shape, and then there are these eclipses that come by. And so I think because it's there and it's so prominent, I'm not surprised that it shows up on so many different stories around the world. Yeah. Is there a universality of it? I was talking with someone last night about the floods. You know, the fact that there's so many floods, stories of floods. Almost every culture has a story of floods. Now, the Judeo-Christian explanation is that, well, you know, Noah's Ark and the Noah's flood, and that the flood covered the whole earth. Personally, I believe in floods. I believe in the Old Testament, but I don't believe that there's enough water to cover up the whole earth. I think that floods are a phenomena, and even though the scripture may say, and the flood covered the whole earth, well, it probably covered the whole earth that they had known. Yeah, the universality of the floods, of the sun, the moon, the balance. But again, I think it comes back to our trying to understand us and the balance of nature. And can the poor old earth survive what we're doing to it, or for how much longer? And those poor people in Southeast Asia now and Indonesia, and because of the storms and the raising ocean levels, it's really tough, and yeah, we have to think about those questions. I think we have one more question, then somebody's going to take a picture. I think.
Yeah, real quick, I'll just follow up on what you were saying. When you were explaining the orchid people and the boat ceremony, I grew up in India, born and raised there, and there is a state called Kerala, which is along the west coast of India. And I just pulled up images of a boat that looks exactly like the boat you showed on the screen, like the orchid pictures. And it is so uncanny that it is exactly the same. The story is also the same. People all come together when the boat is supposed to be christened and launched into the ocean. And even today, it's 1700 years of continuous ritualistic way of doing it. It still happens. So every year there is a festival. You can go and see. This is exactly what happens. And it's amazing to hear that, thousands of miles away, and it is still the same.
Yeah, although I would just say, I want you to come up and look more closely at this image. Take a picture of it and then compare your Indian examples with this. These are just a one-of-a-kind, handmade, carve the pieces, fit them together. So come look at the picture. Yeah. Well, thank you again. You've been so gracious.
Let's give Dr. Stamps another round of applause. Thank you.